something else that I might be missing, inshallah. Now, when I was asked to give this talk, there was a conversation about how can we connect the spiritual with the political. How can we as Muslims understand our role in terms of what's happening around the world, but also from a spiritual perspective. Understanding how do we understand truly and analyze our responsibility as Muslims when it comes to our acts of worship, our understanding of Islam, but also our understanding and our role into on earth, specifically when we are facing this genocide that is taking place in Gaza. And there's many ways we can talk about this. And I remember when you read Sayyid Qutb in the shade of Quran, and may Allah accept from the sisters that were reading some Quran, many of you might not know Sayyid Qutb, but Sayyid Qutb is someone who really translated Quran in a profound way. Not your usual translation where you just mention what the previous scholars said about specific ayahs, what the companions said about them, how to understand them in that context. But Sayyid Qutb brings in these ayats. He reads them, he understands the tafsir that happened before, he understands the context where these ayat were revealed to Prophet ﷺ, but also he adds his own commentary that are relevant to the times that he lived in, and they're still relevant until today, because this has been only about 67 years ago. So in Surah Al-Muddathir, which is arguably considered to be the second surah that was revealed to Prophet ﷺ, he talked about a speech where the Prophet ﷺ, after he was given the message, when he was told Iqra by Jibreel, he went to his wife, Khadija, and he said, of course, as you know, Dathiruni, Zammiluni, cover me. The Prophet ﷺ was seeking peace, and I'll come back in a second. But later on, during the process, when the Prophet ﷺ was told to Iqra and told to read and told to Qum fa'anzir, and later on we know the story where the Prophet ﷺ would stay all night pray, and his feet would actually bleed from staying up all night praying for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Sittna Khadija radiallahu anha used to tell him that, why do you pray that long? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has already forgiven all of your sin. Like, you're granted Jannah. Like, you're the prophet, you're the last prophet, you're the most honorable prophets of all times. And famously we know when he said, Ala akunu abdan shakura, that why can I be a good, grateful abd, or a worshipper of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And later, famously, he told her that when they were talking about at that moment when she told him get some sleep, he told her famously that لَقَدْ وَلَّى عَهْدُ النَّوْمِ يَا خَدِيجَةَ, that the time of sleep or the era of sleep has ended. Now, some scholars say that this is not maybe a sahih, it might not be very authentic that he actually said this. But Sayyid Qutb still picked on that and mentioned it in his tafsir because it's really fascinating, the idea behind it and the context behind it. And since it doesn't touch our aqidah, doesn't touch our creed, it doesn't change Islam itself, it's okay to mention it. Because even if the Prophet ﷺ did not actually say that quote, it's stilling to all of his actions. It summarizes his actions, it summarizes his history, it summarizes his legacy. So there's nothing harmful in us repeating that and reflecting upon it. This is a context about the title. Now, when it comes to the title, as we know that the first ayah that was revealed to Allah subhanahu to Prophet ﷺ was what? Iqra, or read. But why was, again, I told you this is going to be more interactive, so I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. Why was it Iqra and nothing else? Okay. Amazing. That's a great point. Another reason. So that's one reason for sure. It's a miracle in itself. And it was a shock to Prophet ﷺ that, like, I don't know how to read. Even though, again, there are some opinions that maybe Prophet ﷺ used to know how to read, and us calling him illiterate was something that has to do with about the culture itself and not literacy when it comes to that. But that point still stands. But there's another point, which is in Islam itself, the idea of iqra and the idea of understanding and reading is essential to who we are as Muslims. We're not only supposed to be following without understanding. And for the Prophet ﷺ, a person that he was sent to change all of humanity, for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give him the first action to be read is stilling. Because when you say, I'm going to send you as a messenger from me, what do you expect the first thing for me to ask you to do as my messenger? To spread the message, to do something. But instead, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala started with what? Read. Meaning that if I'm hiring you to deliver a message for me, do you really need to understand it? You're a messenger. But the idea where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala emphasized that the first command I'm given the last prophet on earth to read is telling an evidence of how important it is for us to understand and grasp and to not just repeat without understanding. And after the Prophet ﷺ was told to read and learn and analyze, and after him realizing his role as the last prophet on earth, after realizing this humongous responsibility that has given to him, and I really want you to take a second and think about it in your brain and kind of imagine it. Imagine you as a human being facing with an angel that has been reportedly have wings that literally can cover the skies. Imagine you being in that position. Imagine the fear that comes in your heart from the moment itself, from the heat of the moment, that what's really happening. But later on, imagine that after that shock that you just had, that you've been told that you are a prophet of a God, a divine God, and you are responsible to change the whole world. And this man is not a man that is the president of the United States of America, someone who has tools and access and power and unlimited access to money and resources. This is an illiterate man that lives in the desert. Now, why is this context important? It's not to undermine the Prophet ﷺ, but to truly show you that the responsibility that was given to this person, to this figure, our Prophet ﷺ, was not something that was simple. Just me coming to you and tell you, hey, can you please do me a favor and deliver this message to even share this online. For him to go through all of this kind of explains why he ran to Sayyidina Khadija and he urged her to cover him because he was shaking. He was in fear. Not in fear of just the fact that he has seen a creature that the wings of that creature covers the sky, but also realizing the responsibility that was given to him. And this is very essential. And this is why read is important, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't just didn't just tell him, hey, just follow me and I'll guide you through the way. Like he told him, I want you to be actively understanding the message I'm going to be giving you. The Prophet ﷺ, after this impact, after the shaking that he went through, after the shock that he has witnessed, he went to his wife Khadija and he told her, Dathiruni zammiluni, like cover me, like, give me peace, give me harmony, comfort me. Like this is another message about like importance of harmony between couples, between wife and husband, and why it's important for us to play that role together, and how important that is in the da'wah, how important it is for humanity, that we don't just get married for the sake of just creating families. Of course, that's the most important thing, but we can't do things on our own. Imagine the Prophet ﷺ, the most powerful man on earth, guided by Allah, needed his wife to cover him. That shows you that no matter how strong we get, how much strength we have, we still need that reliance on somebody else to take care of us. Now, after the Prophet ﷺ kind of went to sleep or was trying to get comforted by Khadija radiallahu anha, Jibreel came back to him, and what did he tell him? Ya ayyuha al-muddathir, qum fa'anzir, wa rabbaka fakabbir. Like, all you who are covered, stand up, get up, and warn people. And pray for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right away, as soon as Prophet ﷺ was still processing the shock that he's been through, processing this experience, at that time, it felt like it was daydreaming, it was a dream, it was a nightmare, it was something, like imagine someone lives in that desert, doesn't know how to read, doesn't know anything in life except like basics. Out of nowhere sees a creature that covers the universe. And not only that, it's told he's going to be leading the world. Now, after all of that, still processing, Jibreel comes to him and tells him, get up. Like, what are you doing? Get up. It's time to get up and warn people. And this is, if anything, is emphasis on the idea that it's not that we need to read only and understand in Islam and worship and do active worship and go to halaqat and listen to this and come every week, go to your favorite speaker and attend their lectures and listen to all the mashayikh on YouTube. That's not what Islam is about. Even though you're being shocked, still you need to get up and warn. And what's really imperative here to understand is that the Prophet ﷺ was told to get up and warn before he even get the whole message, right? The message was not clear yet. And we hear this all the time. Should I go to protest or should I like work on my deen first? This dichotomy that we create for ourselves to run away from responsibilities. Do both. The Prophet ﷺ barely knew anything about the new message that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given to him, but he still was told to get up and warn because there's no time to sleep. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed another ayah, and he said, يا أيها المزمر قم الليل إلا قليلا نصفه أو انقص منه قليلا أو زد عليه ورتل القرآن ترتيلا إنا سنلقي عليك قولا ثقيلا. That you're covered, who you are, like who's being comforted. Get up at night, like basically sleep only for a little bit at night and spend the whole night worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and praying for him and reading Quran. And rattil al-Quran tartila, like rattil, as we know, is not just reading, but processing, analyzing, understanding, reflecting. And then he told him that we will give you heavy speech. Like, and this is very important. Because we constantly talk about this, and I fall into this myself, right? And I'm sure everybody here falls into it as well. We constantly think, okay, we know enough about Islam. It's our job as an activist now to just do my work. But then we forget the spirituality that we need to take care of ourselves. And this spirituality is not a privilege. It's not a luxury. And I gave many talks about this before, and I don't want to repeat the cycle again. But there's a reason why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to spend all night worshipping him and praying for him and reading the Quran. Meaning, what's the goal of standing up all night praying and reading the Quran? Besides pleasing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what's the point of it? What is it? Increase iman, absolutely. What else? What? Discipline. Absolutely. That's the word I was looking for. Discipline. Meaning that in order for you to receive that heavy speech, to receive that heavy message, you have to have discipline. You have to have discipline for what? Why did the Prophet ﷺ and us as Muslims need to have discipline? Absolutely. And then what else? So that's the first part. What's the second part? Spread the message. If we as Muslims, or we as activists, wouldn't have the discipline to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, how can we have discipline to fight for His sake? How can we have, if we don't have discipline, how can you go around and be consistent about spreading the message? If I'm telling you, I'm like, as Raja, I have issues with I have an issue with discipline. I really do. Like, and this is something that my wife is into psychology, and she always tells me, you always catch up yourself because you're a little bit smart, so you don't work too hard, but you eventually get it going. Like when I used to be in college, I used to do my papers literally like we're doing it at 5 a.m. before it's due. And my exam, same thing. It's the worst thing to do, by the way. And I learned this the hard way, that when I was young, I was always told that you're smart, you're smart. That it built subconsciously in my brain that I don't need to work hard. I can just figure it out in the last minute. And that did eventually affect me in my life, in college, later on. Like, you can't just, like, swing it all the time. You can't just hustle all the time. There has to be discipline. It has to be a process for you to do things in a systematic way to make sure that you're continuing with the struggle. Because consistency is very important. And it's always told that consistency and discipline is better than smart. And I want you to take this very seriously with my own experience. Now, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala again gave him the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam the message, told him to get up and warn people, but also told him what? Have discipline. So these are the 3 rules, or the 3 parts of a formula for any successful Muslim to be successful in life, for not only on a personal level, but also as an activist, as a da'i, as someone who truly wants to do something for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I really want you to understand that this is not a luxury. As a Muslim, and I will talk about this later, your job is not just to pray and fast, and that's it. As I mentioned, as we talked about, we are told to pray and fast. Praying and fasting, is it a goal or an end? Is it it's the same thing. Is it an end or is it means to something? Means. Anybody think it's a goal in itself or an end to something? It's okay, I'm not shaming anybody. Good, I like that. What is it? It's a goal, it's both? How is it both? But everything you just said right now means it's a means to something. I'm willing to listen. But yes, anytime Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about active worship in the Quran, what did he say? لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ, right? After salah, after siyam, meaning that you don't just pray and fast for the sake of it. You do it so you might reach taqwa. There's a goal for it. Of course, it's a goal in a sense of like, when you want to talk about like micro goals in itself, like you teaching yourself, or like you want to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, like when we say, when there's good news, you go pray 2 rak'ahs for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Absolutely. Like, it's fine to think about it that way. But in the essence of things, no, it's a means to an end. And that end is to discipline you, to make you a better human being, and to make you a better Muslim. So because of this, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as I mentioned in my intro, told Khadija that the era of sleep is gone. Because I need to learn about Islam, I need to relay the message, I need to fight for the message, because the whole world will be fighting me sooner or later, and will be fighting my ummah. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is commanding me to stand all night to worship Him. So clearly, when do I have time to sleep? Now, when I tell you this, of course, I don't expect you to not sleep forever again. I'm just saying that it needs to be a kind of a mindset shift for us, that we don't live our life to sleep and have fun. And again, there's nothing wrong with having fun, nothing wrong with you doing what you need to do to make your life simpler and easier, and just sometimes do lazy things for the sake of it. Fully understandable. We're not prophets. But the idea is, the mindset shift has to happen where we can't just spend our life eating and drinking and having fun and working and going to sleep, and that's it. It's this idea of the era of sleep is gone, is a figure of speech to say that sleeping is something that is secondary. It's only important for me to keep me going, because we know our bodies will shut down, we'll start hallucinating. We can't be functioning if we don't sleep. So definitely sleep. But the idea is, again, that after learning all this that we've learned about Islam, we can't go back to normal. We can't go back to status quo. This has to shift your mindset to make you know that you as a Muslim have bigger responsibilities that you think. Truly. And the Prophet ﷺ knew this since day one. And this is why he was in so much fear and so much shock at that time, and he needed Khadija radiallahu anha to comfort him. And it's just a small statistics. I hate statistics, but just for the sake of it, the Prophet ﷺ, metaphorically speaking, he technically literally never slept. He was, after that, he spent 8 years in jihad with 80 battles. Technically battle every single month. So this is a prophet that spreads the message, teaches people. He's fighting. He's committing involved in jihad, involved in protecting people, spreading justice, spreading light. But yet he still stays up all night and he prays for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is why when Khadija told him, like, he felt bad for him, so his feet bleeding, as I mentioned in my intro, he responded and said, "Ala akunu abdan shakura." Why can't I just be a grateful slave to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or a grateful worshipper for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? So this is important. Now, but this had an impact and influence on the companions themselves too. And I think we always talk about the Prophet ﷺ as a romanticized human being. He's a prophet at the end of the day. We get it. He's different than us. He has more capabilities than us. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed him with more discipline and strength than all of us, more emotional intelligence, more knowledge, more everything. We know that. But the companions themselves are, of course, they're better than us. They're, as we know in Islam, they're udul. Like the Sahaba means they're people who don't commit major sins. And that's what adala is of the companions. It's not perfection like the prophets, but close enough. Now, the companions themselves were also influenced by that. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَالَّذِينَ يَبِيتُونَ لِرَبِّهِمْ سُجَّدًا وَقِيَامًا, meaning that those who were literally spend the night just prostrating and sleep and praying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala all night. In standing and standing all night for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it was narrated that Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu mentioned one time that he never had a dream or a daydream. How many of you never had a dream or a daydream? It's impossible. The reason for that is if you know the cycles of sleep, right? If you know the cycles of sleep, after 45 minutes, the cycle of sleep is 45 minutes. You have to get deep into sleeping, slowly get deep. And this is why people who wake up in the morning sometimes wake up very angry, because you wake up in the middle of your cycle, and that's the worst. But if you complete your cycle of sleep, you wake up in a very good mood. You sleep only if you get in the deep cycle of your sleep. Abu Bakr radiallahu anh never ever went into deep sleep, whether in the daytime or nighttime. And this is why he never dreamt after that. Because his brain was constantly busy. Like, how can he sleep? When he feels that he's a companion of the last prophet on earth, understanding the responsibility that is given to him, how could he sleep? Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anh, when he was asked about his sleeping habits, he responded and he said, how can a person or someone like me actually sleep? If I sleep in the daytime, then I transgress against the people I'm responsible for as the Khalifa. He's responsible for people. He feels the responsibility that he can't sleep in the daytime, because if he does, then he's not fulfilling his responsibility. If I sleep at night, then I transgress against my Creator, because in the daytime I'm busy with the people to help them out, and at night I need to take care of myself spiritually and it please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So how can someone like me sleep? So the idea of sleep is, again, when I highlight it, is because it's essential in the times of the companions, in the times of the Prophet ﷺ, in terms of them understanding this. And finally, Khalid ibn al-Walid, and we know Khalid ibn al-Walid was one of the greatest companions when it comes to what? Battles. He was the most inspiring general on earth, not just by Muslims, by the way. It was known by him, it was narrated about him, that he used to not allow anybody to sleep, either his enemies or his own soldiers. His enemies by constantly fighting them and not making them feel comfortable. His soldiers by not allowing them to sleep without what? Constantly doing adhkar, doing salah at night, taking shifts, constantly doing something. Because he knows, like, we ain't about that life about sleeping. We have, like, a decade or 2 decades of our life need to give it to Islam. I don't have time to sleep. It's like when you're in college in 4 years. How many of you in college? Few? Okay, not too many. Like, when you're in college, you don't sleep that much. You're constantly busy with your studying, with your hanging out with your friends, with your SJPs and MSAs. You sleep a few hours a day, you're happy, you're good, you're running coffee, literally. Because you understand that life in college is, these 4 years are the most important 4 years of your life, and you don't want to waste them sleeping. So imagine that for college, but these companions and the Prophet ﷺ understood that they have a message to change the world, and because of that, they can't sleep. And I was not planning on doing this, but on even mentioning this, but now I remembered. Nowadays, Do we know anybody or any kind of people that actually don't sleep nowadays for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? No? I actually think they are. Anybody? Great point. But we kind of know them. Who? Say it loud. Absolutely. People of Gaza. People of Gaza are literally not sleeping. And I'm not only talking about the average people. The average people are not sleeping because they have no choice, unfortunately. They're being bombed constantly. But there are another group of people that are not sleeping. The resistance. The people who are living in tunnels, that are running on dates and water for months. All they do is what? Is worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and fight the enemy and protect their people. Meaning that when I tell you about the era of sleep is ended or is gone, I'm not just talking about the Prophet ﷺ and his companions. Yes, they are the people we aspire to be like them, right? That's why we emphasize on them too much. But nowadays, we don't have to go for 1,400 years ago to learn how to become better human beings, how to become better Muslims. We are witnessing it right now in Gaza. And I'm not exaggerating, by the way. Like, it's very well documented that these the resistance fighters in Gaza actually don't sleep. They spend all night worshiping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, doing adhkar, praying, and in the daytime, they fast, and then they break their fast on dates and water. And they protect their people, and that's all they do in life. So it's not uncommon. And if some certain, and we know this rule and deduction in math, right? If you can prove that an idea is possible for a small portion, then we can generalize it and deduct by it that it's possible for everybody else. But we choose to sleep. That's the reality. Now again, I'm not talking in extremes. We can't be like people of Gaza. People of Gaza are in a different context and a different situation. But the idea behind it is that truly, when we understand what this message of Islam is about, we can't truly sleep at night without thinking about the responsibility that is given to us. That's my message behind us. Speaking of Gaza and speaking of this oppression, the reason why Allah subhanahu the Prophet ﷺ didn't think about sleep much or was so busy, and at the moment when he received the message, he was extremely shocked. He was extremely afraid because of the ramification of this message and because of the weight of this message. Him understanding how powerful this message is. He understood his responsibility. Nowadays, when we think about Gaza as that we are living in genocide, and by the way, and this sounds a little bit ironic and dystopian, but when you are living through a genocide, you can actually appreciate Islam and appreciate our spirituality more, right? Because if you think about it, and I go this struggle all the time, how can you live in life knowing that this amount of cruelty, this amount of oppression is, like when you read about the Holocaust, for example, like how they threw millions of people and burned them alive. When you read about what Europeans did in Africa, specifically in Congo, the king of Belgium, like literally killing millions of people of Congo. Like when you think about it, it's like, what kind of human beings are those? But we always think about them in history, right? Something that happened, it doesn't happen now. But currently we are living through a genocide, right? How can you say that you're capable of going to sleep without actually thinking about them and without thinking about the responsibility of us as Muslims to actually stopping that genocide? If the Prophet ﷺ and his companions didn't sleep because they understood the assignment, they understood the responsibility that was given to them, what about us? Why can't we understand our responsibility and the assignment that is given to us to stay awake? And again, it's a metaphor that don't sleep, meaning that to have to think about these things and understand your responsibility as a Muslim. And I want to say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when he talked about us, when we talk about cause and effect, he says, كنتم خير أمة أخرجت للناس تأمرون بالمعروف وتنهون عن المنكر وتؤمنون بالله. That you are the best of nations, or the best of people that were sent to other people. Now, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not end the ayah there. He made a condition. Meaning, if I tell you, you're the best, you're the best messenger because you always deliver on time. So you're not the best messenger just for being you, because of something that you do, something that you're good at. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us that we are the best of nations when we enjoin what is good and forbid what is evil. He didn't say that you're the best of nations because you pray and fast. He didn't say you're the best of nations because you're herbs and daisies and I don't know what. You're the best of people because you enjoin what is good and forbid what is bad. Meaning that if you don't enjoin what is good and forbid what is evil, are you still the best of nations? Absolutely not. So it's not an ethnicity, it's a responsibility that is given to us, that was given to Prophet ﷺ, and we have to take it in the strongest way possible. I want to leave some time for maybe Q&A, but before I do that, I want to emphasize on something important. When we are talking about understanding our responsibility as Muslims in terms of what we need to do in this life, which is worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, ending oppression, and spreading justice. If you think about it, I would like you to think like this. The Muslims had civilizations for hundreds of years, right? The Khilafah, the Abbasi, the Ottomans, the Fatimiyin, hundreds of Khilafah, hundreds of civilizations. Did the Muslims ever build anything like the pyramids? Or the Great Wall in China? Or like the Rome, what is it called? What is it? The Colosseum in Rome. Did we build any of that? Do we have any history of it? Why? How can Muslims take over the world? Because literally Muslims took over the world. We know that, right? Right? How can we prove that we as Muslims had the greatest civilization ever, but we don't have anything to show for it? Anybody has an answer to that? What is it that we built? Mosques, okay. What else? The Ummah, sure. I heard somebody. Minds, okay. People of knowledge, sure. All those are great answers, yes. Absolutely. So all of this, you're all right, yeah. No. Sure. All of this is correct, but I want there's a word that describes it. Not just a word, yeah. Go. Sure. But that's all part of something. We built, okay. So what? A what? Nation, okay. Okay, so everything I mentioned, the Colosseum in Rome, the pyramids, the Great Wall, what are those? Landmarks, things. Who built them? What kind of people? Those are the one who engineered it. Who actually built them? Slaves, oppressed people. So all of these great civilizations built great things by using what? When you have slaves, that means what kind of society did you have? Oppressed society, oppressed civilization. Muslims never built that, and they built something else instead. What is it? They built a moral system. They built an ethical message that is meant to survive things and materialism. And this is why everything that you mentioned about building mosque and the continuation of the message, all of that is important. And this is how you build a moral compass. So we built a moral compass. And this is why all of these civilizations and all these ideas collapsed. Give me one continued message that is over 1,000 years that is still strong until today. Christianity is destroyed. Judaism has turned into an ethnicity. All other religions have turned into something that is so passive, and you keep it in a closet in your home, but once you leave the house, you become a capitalist. All you care about is money and food. What is the only message truly is Islam. Because our civilizations were built on freedom, were built on justice, were built on liberty, and people were spreading all their life and their knowledge into building a moral compass. But is Kaaba something that is like truly a magical like building, a landmark? It's a landmark, but it was built before Islam. But was it like, if you compare, like, let's be honest, of course, without remove the spiritual aspect of things, remove the holy part of Mecca, of Kaaba. If you compare Kaaba and to the pyramid, like, are they even compatible, materialistically speaking? Exactly, that's the point. The point is, the societies and these civilizations were so oppressive that all they cared about was just to build things to show that they're powerful by enslaving people. But Islam didn't care about building things. They cared about building people, about building the message. This is why they understood, again, what exactly is the message of Islam. And this is why, by the way, I don't want to go off tangent too much, but this is why the Khulafa al-Rashidun, the first Khulafa, four Khulafa, right? In comparison to the Khulafa al-Rashidun and Khulafa al-Umayyun, who built more civilizations and who spread Islam more? No? The Umayyads. The first Khulafa al-Rashidun, who are the most important Khulafa? The first ones. In comparison to what they accomplished materialistically, was way less than the Khulafa that came after them. But why do we in Islam appreciate the first ones more than the ones after? Because they focus so much on building that moral compass that allowed the younger generation to build on it. And this is why that generation is very important. I want to end by saying this, and then we can leave it, inshallah, for question and answer. Is the story of Sayyidina Yunus. Sayyidina Yunus, most of us know the story. He was spreading the message for a long time. He gave up. And he wanted to escape, right? What happened to him when he was trying to escape? A whale ate him. But how did he end up being in a whale? Anybody knows? He got on the boat. How did the whale eat him? Swallow him, not eat him. He didn't jump. Or you know what? He was jump, but why did he jump? You close. Yeah. Absolutely. Why? Okay. I'll tell you why for the sake of time. Sayyidina Yunus, I want you to think about this. You know when we talk about like our role as Muslims not to stay just to pray and fast and that's it? And if you do that, a lot of people tell you, oh, just take care of your salah, take care of your family, and live your life. Sayyidina Yunus tried to do that. He tried, he gave up. He realized that after years of trying to spread the message, people didn't believe in him. He was so upset. He was fed up. He said, you know what, I'm going to escape with my life, escape with my religion, and just go worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala far away from here. What ended up happening to him? When he went, while he's escaping on a boat, it was a bad weather, and people in the boat, because they have their own religions, thinking that the god of the sea was upset with them. And in order to please the god of the sea, they had to do what? They had to sacrifice someone. And guess who they chose to sacrifice? Sayyidina Yunus. So the message here is that even when Sayyidina Yunus tried to run with his life, oppression on earth didn't allow him to. That even, like, this is a message to you, that even if you stay in your own home, thieves will still come to you. Even if you stay and live your life and you send your children to public school, they will still be taught things that should not be taught. Meaning that we cannot leave oppression running the earth and do nothing about it. Eventually, when he was in the whale, he also had two options. Either him being completely living in a whale, isolated, and accept that life will be full of oppression, or go back and recommit to his message, to what? To convince people to follow the message and end oppression on earth. Eventually, he followed the last option, which is saying that even if I want to escape with my religion and just live my life, they will not allow me to do so. I have to go back and end oppression. And that's the message of Islam. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ understood when he was given the message that this message is heavy, because there is no turning around. There is no time to sleep. Even if I accept that I'm just going to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they will not leave us alone. Did we invite Europeans to colonize our countries? Or did they come by themselves? They came by themselves. They came and invaded our countries, killed millions of people. Did we invite Zionists and Israelis to go to Gaza and Palestine? They didn't by themselves, and they're killing our people. Meaning that we as Muslims have no choice but to stand up, have no choice but to be proud of our Islam, and to understand that the message of Islam is, as I mentioned early in the beginning, understand the message of Islam completely. Number two, after analyzing it, to actually act upon it. And in order for us to be able to act upon it, we need what? Discipline. And the way we build discipline is through acts of worship, through standing up at night and reading the Quran and praying for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give you that discipline. And then you are ready to be a follower of the Prophet ﷺ and the follower of his companions, to be able to spread the message of Islam and to end injustice and oppression on this earth, and inshallah spread justice until the end of life. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم جزاكم الله خير. I'm happy to, I'm not sure what time is Salah, but okay, we have about like 20 minutes. Either you can let me go home, or you can just ask me questions or say anything. As I mentioned, we'll do more interaction, more interactive. I wanted to go a little bit longer, but since we are a smaller group, we'll create more conversation. So feel free to ask questions or add comments or disagree with me as you tried but failed. But if you want to try again, you can. Just give me a stronger argument. Yes. Anybody specific or just in general? No, that's a great question. The question, for those who didn't hear, I talked about like in Muslim civilization, Muslim khilafah, and Muslim ummas, we didn't have slaves and we didn't have oppression. But the sister mentioned that some oppression happened. And the answer to you is absolutely right. Oppression did happen. But if you look at the grand scheme of things, if you look at all the Muslim civilization and all the Muslim khilafat, in general, there has not been oppression that is compatible, even remotely compatible, to the oppression to other empires. Meaning that Islam in itself teaches us, right, the rule of the majority versus the minority, the extreme minority in this case. Islam in itself gives us a framework for how a khilafah, how an ummah should be. Now, if some of these khulafa, like we know this, like some of the Umayyin khulafa, some of them were corrupt, some of the Abbasiyin, they were corrupt, some of the Ottomans too. But those are the exception to the rule and not the rule themselves. Versus, if you look at every single other civilization around the world, name me one that was fair or was just. The Byzantine, the Romans, the American Empire, the British Empire, the French, they killed millions of people. Muslims didn't kill anybody. Now, by anybody, of course, I don't mean literally anybody. When there was wars, when people were standing up against Islam and trying to fight Islam and stop them from spreading justice, there were wars. But did Muslims ever go into a country and start committing massacres and genocide? This never happened, ever. As a matter of fact, this is known historically speaking that Muslim leaders were the minority in the non-Muslim nations. Like when they started in Egypt, a lot of them were still Christians. They never forced them to change their religion. And we know the famous story of the son of Umar ibn al-As. He was in a race with a Christian guy, and the Christian guy beat him in the race. Then the son of Umar ibn al-As like slapped him or something. And then him and his son, the Christian guys, went to Umar ibn al-Khattab and complained about him. And then Umar called Amr ibn al-As and his son, and he asked the Christian guy to slap Umar ibn al-As and his son. And Amr ibn al-As told Umar, like, how is this my problem? My son did it, not me. He told him he did it because of your authority. So that's something so silly, but it tells you about the difference. Europeans in the 19th century killed millions of people in Africa. Let's take a step back. When Europeans came to America, they killed millions of natives to create so-called United States of America. So there's no comparison. Oppression exists everywhere. But it's not the rule of Islam or Muslim history for oppression to be the common denominator. It's the exception to the rule. And let's not forget, at the end of the Ottoman Empire, when they were collapsing, they came up with the concept of centralization of power. And Islamically speaking, by the way, this is something different than the rest of other empires. Muslims did not have the concept of centralization and power, meaning there is a Khalifa, but each region have their own Emir, and then they manage their own businesses. When the Ottomans were failing and Europe was rising, Ottomans started copying the Europeans, including how to treat certain people in Europe, specifically the minorities and certain people. So yes, it did exist. We can't deny it. We can't say Islamic history is perfect. It's far from it. But if you compare them again, it's not even remotely compatible at all. I hope that answers. Sure. Yeah, yeah. One 100%. You didn't want to say it, but I'll say it. I think this is about the situation that happened in Syria, and we know Iran and Hezbollah was involved, unfortunately, in committing a lot of oppression against Syrian people during the Syrian uprising and the Syrian revolution. That definitely happened, and definitely something we can't forget. And people who were responsible for those crimes should be held accountable 100%. In Islam, we don't support people blindly. Like, for example, the resistance in Gaza today, everybody's standing up with them. Down the line, if they start killing their own people, we stand up against them. Right? Number one, they didn't kill civilians. Number two, Israel is a settler colonial project that every single part of that state is a combatant by definition. And according to international law, people who are under occupation have a right to defend themselves. We don't know exactly what exactly happened on October 7, but there is a lot of reports that Israelis themselves killed their own citizens. Hamas and the Palestinian resistance have made it very clear that they are only targeting soldiers. And their history has shown that they don't lie about their what they do. So it's obvious. I would believe what they say over what Israel propaganda says. Israeli propaganda says they raped women and killed 40 children. There's zero evidence about that. As a matter of fact, AP News just reported 2 days ago, showing that all that was fabrication. It's propaganda war. So we can't fall for it. Now, if a resistance fighter goes tomorrow and kills someone out of nowhere, a civilian or non-combatant or someone who's not according to Islamic Sharia must be killed, we should hold them accountable. There's no blank checks in Islam. وَلَا تَزِرُ وِزْرَةٌ أُخْرَى. Like, meaning one action or deed doesn't overcome the other one. And we know in Islam, there's a famous hadith in the Nawawi that talks about إِنَّ الْأُمُورَ بِخَوَاتِيمِهَا, that things are by the last, as the end of it, meaning that you might be do all your life, you might be do amazing action, that you're only 1 foot away from Jannah, and then you make one massive sin that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will send you to hell. So we don't have this concept of beast or this concept of, what's the word? Nobody is safe. And we know famously Abu Bakr used to say, like, I don't know if I'm safe. I don't know if 1 foot is in Jannah. I'm not sure if my second one will follow me to Jannah. And that's Abu Bakr. We don't have the concept in Islam to make anybody as holy. If they're doing good now, Jazakumullah khair, may Allah accept. If they do something bad in the future, they need to be held accountable. We don't give free blank checks in Islam, period. Absolutely. There's no concept of giving blank checks. If you do good, we appreciate it. If you do good, if you do bad, you need to be held accountable. So, and this is important in life, by the way. Don't ever, and there were stories about like some Muslim speakers that did some mistakes and people just want to forgive them for that. And I'm one of the people who said, like, absolutely not. If you, like, if you violate that trust that is given to you by the community, you can't be given that space again. And this is the difference, right? We can forgive them on a personal level, but if you commit such a crime, then no, we need to take a step back. So again, in Islam, there's no blank checks for anybody, period. I can't even say the Prophet ﷺ should be given a blank check because the Prophet ﷺ is perfect. And we can talk about companions, and people have talked about companions and explained some of the things that they've done. Like, for example, Muawiyah, he made a mistake by choosing his son over Hassan al-Hussein. So nobody's perfect. All right, any other questions or comments? Anything else? No? We have 13 minutes. Oh, did I answer?
Part of the question, so right now, there's a lot of people that are really heavily supporting the Iranian resistance, and they're very when they're questioned on why they support them so heavily, and they're like, oh, but we need to support them right now, but they're kind of ignoring everything that happened with Syria. So sorry.
No. Thank you. I lost track of things there. Absolutely, that's a great question. There's a difference between, and I think we need to make this very clear. There's a difference between supporting and undermining. Meaning, Iran committed crimes in Syria, right? We agree. Iran committed crimes in Iraq, right? We agree. But at the same time, Iran is the only nation that has been supporting the Palestinian struggle, specifically the Palestinian resistance, right? Now, we can say that Iran, we are not happy with what you've done. You need to pay for the crimes that you committed in Syria and Iraq. But at the same time, we appreciate you supporting the Palestinian resistance, because I want you to understand this. From a political sense, as nation states, and now let's remove the Islamic aspect of things. And I'm not trying to say do this to secularize Islam, but more of the reality on the ground. At the end of the day, Iran is a nation state. It's a country that has its own politics, has its own agenda, has its own geo-interest in the region. If they don't support the Gaza and the resistance will be on their own. And if they are in their own, they will be crushed. Now, who does it serve if we now start undermining and demonizing Iran? Israel and the foreign policy of America. Now, I'm not saying that we need to turn a blind eye, and not just me, but like others. Don't turn a blind eye on Iran and say, you know what, Iran are amazing, we support them all the way. Nobody says that. But people are saying what Iran is doing is appreciated. People are saying also Hezbollah is involved in Lebanon is also appreciated, because they are also lifting a little bit of that cruelty from Gaza. Because a lot of people are saying that if Hezbollah is not involved in the north and busying some of those Israeli army in the north, most of these people will be in the south harassing Gaza even more, killing more people. So, meaning that they made a mistake in the past, they need to be held accountable for it. But for us to right now to go and in the midst of war between the United States of America, Israel and the resistance in Palestine and their supporters, if we go and undermine them, then we're literally helping Israel and the United States of America. Now, once the situation is done and contained, we can go back and say, Iran, you've supported Gaza, you supported people's right for liberation. We ask you to do the same thing in Syria, and we need to ask you that you need to pay, and you held those who are responsible for these crimes accountable. We're not going to forget them. We're not going to forgive it. It's not our, we can't forgive, the oppression that happened in Syria is significant. And I want to make it clear, as a Palestinian, I don't want to be saved on the expense of other people getting oppressed. It makes no sense. It's not fair. That's not what Islam is about. But we have to be politically savvy and not be naive. And I want to give you something, I'll come to you. I want to give you something very important. When the Islamic Revolution happened in Iran in 1979, we know Saudi Arabia is in bed with the US, right? We know they're doing the dirty work in the region. They've done and invoked something so disgusting, which is spreading sectarianism in the region. The Saudi Arabia start publishing articles and books and khutab, Islamic khutab, about the danger of Shia and Sunni Islam, rather than focus on the danger of Israel on Muslims, or American imperialism on Islam, or capitalism on Islam. They were paid And by paid, I don't mean like the U.S. gave them money because they don't need the money. They were forced to do it because the U.S. protect the ruling regime in Saudi Arabia, and they said that your job is to create that sectarianism. Why? To demonize the Islamic Revolution in Iran. Because when Islamic Revolution in Iran happened at the beginning, it was very friendly to Sunni Muslims. But the Saudi Arabia played that dirty game of spreading sectarianism and started hearing, I'm sure many of you have heard this, oh, Shi'is are more dangerous than Israel because Israel is our open enemies, but these Shia are from under the table. Like all this nonsense was done to literally support Israel and the United States of America. Right now, and that with that being said, it doesn't mean that like there's no history between the Fatimiyin and Biyun and the Shia and the Sunni back in the day, but like that happened 1,000 years ago. Like it's not relevant to us right now, and there's no reason for us. If we as Sunni Islam are worried about people converting from Sunni and Shia, then we have a bigger problem than Iran. That means we don't know how to teach our Islam, and that's our problem, not their problem. Right? So we have to be careful about not being played by people like that. And that happened since the 70s and the 80s and the early 90s. People were talking about Shi'i Islam as if it's truly worse than Israel and American hegemony and American imperialism. And even though Iran, and by the way, the war that happened between Iraq and Iran, the US invoked that. They're the one who pushed Saddam to go invade Iran after the revolution. So don't believe everything you hear. And sometimes, unfortunately, and this is why when I talked about at the beginning when the Prophet ﷺ was told to read first, not go and spread the message, read, understand. We have to be shrewd. We can't be dumb Muslims who just believe everything they say. Okay, come here. You know what? Yes, Iran made mistakes. Okay, who's against Iran? America, Saudi Arabia, and Israel. America has been killing. Forget about 1492 when they killed I don't know how many millions of natives. Some people say 50, 30, 20, whatever, millions of people here. How many millions of people did America kill around the world? Millions. In Vietnam, in Korea, in Iraq, in Afghanistan, around the world. How many people did Israel kill? How much oppression is Saudi regime responsible for? But how many people did Iran kill before the Syrian revolution? Aside from the wars with Iraq, which is something that is different. Like, why would we have a problem with Iran that never done anything to us? As a matter of fact, is supporting the Palestinian resistance today and go and undermine and demonize them. It will only benefit Israel. Now, again, as I mentioned, we don't forget or forgive what they did in Syria and in Iraq, and that's something you need to be held accountable for. I hope that makes sense. We should not be taking life, everything is about, those are good, then this is bad. This is not how life works. Nothing is black and white. And that doesn't mean, by the way, black and white, and we as Muslims, we know what's right and what is wrong. Sometimes, unfortunately, in politics, because this world is such a mess that there are certain things we have to maneuver to survive. And we know, and I don't want to, we know the stories in Islam that if you are forced at gunpoint to say something that is against Islam, you're allowed to say it. Because Islam doesn't want you to die for something, something like that. And again, I'm not comparing. I'm not saying we go worship Iran. Iran have their own issues, but I hope that makes sense. Thank you. How did you come up with that? I'm seriously. I'm asking. I wanna know where you're coming from. Okay. Absolutely, and I'm not, and I think I made myself clear. They need to be held accountable for what they've done. But to argue that Iran is worse than Israel and the U.S., believe, that's actually a very good question. Why did the Saudis support rebels in Syria with weapons? There's another. There's a more concrete reason for that. I was talking about it a few minutes ago. Yes, but because Saudi sees Iran as their enemy, not America or Israel. So they were using Syrians to engage in a proxy war with Iran. Not because they care about Syrians. Where are they now about Syrians? Where are they about Palestine and Yemen? They went to Yemen and they killed a lot of people in Yemen in their war that declared. Look, I don't want you to, like, I hope I made myself very clear. I'm not happy with what happened in what Iran did in Syria is despicable and it's disgusting and need to be held accountable. It's oppression to a whole different level. The killing of children and families and the destruction, like, there's no question about it. Bashar al-Assad is a tyrant. Absolutely. It's like, there's no question about it. But we don't, right, but we don't compare foreign colonizers that came and took over the Muslim world, killed millions of people, stole our resources, sent us back to the dark ages. We can't compare those with Bashar al-Assad, who's a local tyrant, because in Islam that happened too. That happened like at the times of, like, for example, the son of Muawiyah, Yazid, he killed al-Hussein, bro. He's the grandfather of the Prophet ﷺ. You want worse than that? But we can't say Yazid is worse than America. And again, I don't want to play, oppression Olympics. Like, I don't want to say that the oppression of Palestinians is worse than the Syrians. Absolutely not. As a matter of fact, by numbers, we've lost more Syrians than we lost Palestinians. 100%. That's a fact. I can't deny it as a Palestinian. And I'm not trying to say this oppression is worse and worse. That's not my point. My point was in the question of how do we respond to nowadays saying that. And I'm saying from a political sense that we cannot, right this moment, compare Iran with America. We just can't. I hope that makes sense. Okay. Any other thoughts or questions? I don't know how we went from inspiring spiritual talk into talking about politics. No, I love politics. Yeah. Whoa, you're going to get me in trouble now. Huh?
I think today's getting you in trouble.
I don't think I'll be invited here again. Like, Saudi Arabia is truly at this moment is playing a role, what is known in political science as the native informant. And as a matter of fact, it's worse than a native informant. Saudi Arabia is literally playing, they are stooges to the West. And they're more dangerous than absolutely. Yes, not only because they're internal enemies, but there's something worse. And again, I want to make a disclaimer. When we talk about Saudi, we're talking about the leading regime. We're not talking about Saudis. So I want to make that very clear. Okay, when we talk about any powers or countries, we're talking about the regime, the elites. Saudi Arabia are trying to change Islam. They want to change Islam from a religion of activism, of mobilization, of ending oppression in Palestine and Syria, into a religion that is about praying and fasting and staying home. Right?
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله.
I'll be quick inshallah with the answer before Iqama. So Saudi Arabia is playing that dirty work of changing Islam from its core. And as dangerous for many reasons, I really want to do a whole series about modernity, secularism, and how the world, specifically the West, wants to change Islam. And they're against moral ideas and ethics, and they want us to be slaves to materialism. That all you need to do in life is just work and that's it. Forget about Allah, forget about divine, forget about ethics, forget about anything else. And Saudi Arabia is playing that game with them, and that's very dangerous. It's extremely dangerous because it literally removes Islam from its essence. Saudi Arabia regime needs to be boycotted. And I'm not a mufti, I'm not a sheikh, don't call me on this. I don't think you should that. You should be doing Umrah. I think that money should be donated to the people of Gaza and people of Syria and people of Yemen and people in regions. Why? For many reasons. Number one, they use that money to oppress people, Muslim. They use that money and you going to do Umrah to what? To take more Islamic authority, that they're the vanguards of Islam. And this has been said